Okay, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the general meeting of the Nevada Commission for Persons who are deaf and hard of hearing for May 2024. For the record, I am Eric Wilcox. I am chair of the commission. I welcome all of you. Let me do a roll call of members and then I'll talk about accommodations. Eli, I see, is here. Is Jamie here?
This is Obiama for the record. Jamie is here, but her camera is off for personal medical needs.
Okay. Thank you. Susan, I see. Laura, I see. Is Ryan Feldman here?
This is Obiama for the record. Ryan typically comes in a little bit late, reason being she's dropping the kids off for their activities for the day. So she'll check in about 15 minutes.
Great. And Catherine is here. I see Catherine.
I'm here. I'm sorry I look like I'm in a winter parka. Our building is very cold.
And Lance is here. Good morning, Lance. Okay, great. Thank you all for being here. We have a quorum. Let me talk briefly about accommodations for the meeting. As you'll see, we have captioning. Should be a link in the agenda if you want to access the live captioning. And we have 2 interpreters that will switch off. We will also take a break approximately every hour or so to give the accommodations team 5 or 10 minutes to rest their hands and fingers. We employ strict turn taking at this meeting in order to facilitate the accommodations for everybody. Generally, when we are discussing outside of the public comment periods, when we're discussing items on the agenda, discussion of those agenda items is limited to members of the commission. However, at my discretion, we may open up the discussion of certain agenda items to the broader community for comment. If you want to ask a question or raise a comment during an agenda item, please use the raised hand tool in Zoom or turn your camera on and wave your hand to get my attention, but then please wait until I call on you to speak. And then every time you speak, state your name for the record. It's very important. And that's valuable for the transcript that we get from the meeting because your name will appear next to your words and we can piece together who said what after the meeting. And the final thing, if you need the multi-pin feature in order to better access ASL during the meeting, please turn your camera on now and wave at us or put that request in the chat. And Lorraine will give you the multi-pin feature. With that, I'm going to move on to item 2 of the agenda, which is public comment. And I believe Lorraine has a statement. And there is one request, Lorraine, before you start in the chat for multi-pin accessibility. And then you can read your instructions.
And this is Obiama for the record. Before we proceed, typically, if you are a subcommittee member, you can go ahead and turn off your camera and we'll have only the commissioners on at this time. Thank you.
Go ahead, Lorraine.
Good morning. This is Lorraine Belt-Dolan for the record. Public comment. No action may be taken upon a matter raised under the public comment period unless the matter itself has been specifically included on an agenda as an action item. To provide public comment telephonically, dial 646-931-3860. When prompted to provide the meeting ID, enter 824-3032-7521. Passcode is 302608. Comments will be limited to 5 minutes per person. People making comments will be asked to begin by stating their name for the record and to spell their last name and provide the secretary with written comments. If you're attending this meeting via Zoom, you do not have to hang up and dial in. You can use the raise hand feature used at the bottom of your screen, or you can just turn on your camera and wave at us and let us know that you would like to make public comment. Public comment is now open at this time.
Thank you, Lorraine. This is Eric for the record. I'm going to go first to Shelley. Go ahead, Shelley.
And Shelly's just checking to make sure the interpreter can see her, and she can. So this is Shelly Freed for the record. I would like to make a public comment this morning on the agenda item in pertaining to this meeting. In regards to language access plan, the LAP, I reviewed the components, but I do have some questions in regards to it. My first question is how do we come to the number of ASL users? Reason being is it shows 1%, and that's not accurate. The interpreter is going to clarify the number. 1%, right? Okay. It was 1%, and that is not accurate. I want to know how that number came to be. Second question I have is I would like to know, excuse me, I would like to make the comment that all of the surveys, the websites that were used in regards to the LAP that were sent to a deaf or hard of hearing person should have been given in language options. There wasn't any option for ASL or other that we could type in order to give me the option. So we had to type it in English. And I don't think that that's appropriate for the community either. We need to add ASL in the language drop-down box so that all states, county, every county in the state and the survey and data that is collected from that would have that option so we could get that information. In addition, when I was reading through, I came across the state plan, and I just wanted to make a comment in regards to that state plan when it comes to the pool of interpreters and the pool for teachers for the deaf or teachers of the deaf working in an educational setting. We know we have an extreme shortage in the state of Nevada. I would propose what was done in the past and what is done in the past is not working, and we propose that we should use what California does in order to recruit and to retain the teachers in the educational system. So we could have a buy-in of applicants within the state of Nevada. If that were truly okay, so excuse me, if a pension was truly offered, hold on, we're gonna go back. If a pension is offered. Okay, so excuse me, the interpreter just needed to clarify in regards to retirement and a pension. So having funds available, monies that don't apply to retirement or a pension with the state of California. So that idea that they use that system in California would be something I would want to propose here in Nevada. And those were yeah, that was all that I had. Thank you.
This is Eric for the record. Thank you very much, Shelley. Anybody else for public comment? You can use the raised hand feature or turn your camera on and wave at us now. I'll give it another 15 seconds or so. Okay, I am seeing none. Be advised that there will be another public comment period at the end of the meeting. So if there's a desire to make more public comment, you'll have that option at the end of the meeting. With that, then we will go on to item 3 of the agenda. This is the approval of minutes from the March 27 general meeting of the commission. Are there any comments or corrections from members of the commission on the minutes from that meeting? Laura, go ahead.
And this is Laura Fussell for the record. I propose that I motion that we approve the minutes from the March meeting.
Gotcha. Thank you. Is there a second for that motion? I see Eli with a second. Last chance for any comments, corrections? Seeing none, then all members of the commission, if you're in favor of approving those minutes, please just signal by raising your hand. Thank you. The motion passes and minutes are approved. With that, then we will go on to item 4 of the agenda. This is updates and feedback from the commission on language acquisition plan for the Aging and Disability Services Division, and Shannon Ivy is here.
Good morning, everyone. Can
Morning. Yeah, go ahead. I think we need to share. Is there a presentation that we're sharing?
Yes, absolutely. I will share the presentation here. I just want to make sure that
And before you start, we usually ask that the commissioners turn their cameras off when we share the PowerPoints, just to facilitate, so just the interpreter and the presentation are visible, and the presenter.
Sure.
Thank you.
go ahead and screen share, and then I will just ask if you do have any, just verify that you are seeing the screen.
I don't see it yet.
All right, let screen share again. See if it works.
There it goes.
Okay, great. So good morning, everyone. Many of you know me as Shannon Sprout. I did get married and have a name change to Shannon Ivy. So just want to make sure if that is confusing for anybody, that that is still the same person, even though it may look different on your screen. I just want to say thank you to the commission for giving us the opportunity today to be able to present on Aging and Disability Services Division Language Access Plan for our 2024 submission. Today we will go through our legal requirements, our language access plan guide, the division specific language access plan, and then our request to solicit feedback. So the legal requirements for language access are rooted in many areas. We have the Title 5 of the Title 6 of the Civil Rights Act. We have American Disabilities Act, the Presidential Executive Order, and then 2 sessions ago, Senate Bill 318, which was codified in NRS 232. In the root of the law for Nevada, there are about 8 major components of that law. Every agency under the executive branch shall designate an employee that's responsible for developing and revising the biennial plan. That is the language access coordinator, and that is the role that I hold for Aging and Disability Services Division. Every agency language access plan must assess existing needs of the agency and clients and how the agency is meeting those needs. The plan shall identify where there are gaps, and then how the agency shall develop procedures to close those gaps. It must also outline any compliance with federal regulation and state law, and again, how we're going to address where those gaps are. We also will address the availability of language access services during a declared emergency. The law really was specific around COVID, and that piece of the law was sunset when the emergency became null and void. At that point, though, we really felt, as we looked at the law, it's important that we are planning for our next emergency. And so we did include in our language access plan some standard information for any declared emergency. The plan must also look at your funding needs and make recommendations to the legislature concerning any statutory changes necessary to implement the language access plan. Every language access plan for every agency must go through a public comment period. And then every agency must submit their language access plan when they submit their biennial budget. So that's referenced to your NRS 353 on that biennial process where we submit our budgets, our plan also, or our report gets submitted with it. Just for reference here, Aging and Disability Services Division's mission is that Nevadans, regardless of age or ability, will enjoy meaningful life led with dignity and self-determination. Our mission is to ensure that provisions of effective supports and services meet the needs of individuals and families, helping them to lead independent, meaningful, and dignified lives. And our philosophy is that the agency seeks to understand and respond to the individuals and their needs using principles of accessibility, accountability, cultural and linguistically appropriate services, ethics, mutual respect, timeliness, and transparency. As part of our language access plan and our policy, we have adopted that it is the policy of Aging and Disability Services Division to ensure meaningful and timely access to program services and resources to limited English proficient individuals. Okay.
And Shannon, if I could get you to hold on 1 second before you go to the next slide, we're going to switch interpreters.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Go right ahead, Shannon.
Okay, great, thank you. So just so that we can preface this presentation, this is not our language access plan. That language access plan will be posted in the coming days on our website for a public comment period. What we've done here for the purpose of the presentation today is just highlighted some of the points within that plan and to present to all of our commissions and boards that had the opportunity in this period when they were meeting before we do our submission for your input as well. So I do want to refer everybody in the coming days to the website. I will make sure to provide that to Lorraine and that she can share that with the commission so that you can see the full report in context once we have it posted. So this is really specific to how Aging and Disability Services Division is going to carry out those 8 core components of the law. So we are committed to taking all reasonable steps to provide limited English proficient individuals with meaningful access to services, programs, and activities. We seek to reduce barriers by increasing capacity to deliver services and benefits to people in their preferred language. In our policies, we have been very transparent and forthcoming with staff and really have continued to press on this issue that services are required to be provided at no cost to the individual, and that needs to be at the forefront of what we do. And that those staff at the initial point of contact need to make sure that that's known and also have the duty to identify the primary language and assist individuals with interpreter services as needed. Use of formal interpreter translators is required by qualified bilingual staff or professional interpreter translator services. That includes our American Sign Language interpreter professionals. Family, friends, and other customers or minor children are not permissible. So I know that we have heard a lot, especially in the previous week on the commission's presentation to the interim committee for seniors and veterans and persons with disabilities, that really we want to make sure the professionals are providing these services, that they're qualified and that that burden is not placed on a family, friend, customer, or a minor child. No individual shall be denied services based on their language access needs. So those are the rooted in all of our policies. And then what I want to do is take you and walk you through our ADSD profile. This is within the language access plan that we'll be posting on our website. It goes through every single program. So we have 8 core programs within Aging and Disability Services Division that have a multitude of programs underneath of them. As you read through the language access plan that will be posted, it will go through each one of those core programs, and then it'll give you the data profile specifically for that program. This data, for the purposes of this presentation, is rolled up, and it's also rolled up in our plan as well, so that we can show that comparison over our efforts towards compliance. I will put, this is on the next slide, but I do want to preface here that we do have data limitations. One of our major limitations upon the enactment of this bill was that a lot of our data systems were antiquated and don't have the capacity to collect the data necessary and required by the Language Access Plan. We are in the process of trying to resolve that. We did receive an American Rescue Act plan funds for many of our data modernization projects. And so we will be looking at, by the time we report in the next plan, we hope to have better data on this information. So the data represented here today is specific to the programs within Aging and Disability Services Division. Just for comparison, we have provided what our report was in state fiscal year 21 and compared to where we are now in state fiscal year 23. In state fiscal year 21, I would also indicate that we didn't have a requirement for individuals to provide us with information in a lot of the programs. So even if the program or the data system had the capability or the functions to collect the data, we did not require that information to be provided. So somebody may not have provided their preferred language or their proficiency level at that time, and so that does also play into the data that we're able to collect. We know that there's much more out there that we're probably not aware of, just given the percentage of unreported information. So you'll see in comparison, we have grown in our total client population accessing services within Aging and Disability Services Division in any one of our programs. So we've grown by about 6,000 total in caseload. That makeup of the caseload has changed from state fiscal year 21 to 23. We had 63% reporting English as their primary language in 21 and 71% reporting English in 23. That there's been a consistent reporting in 7% of the total program populations of Spanish speaking. And then you're going to see this big change in other languages from state fiscal year 21 to 23. That really comes about because, again, I said that not all programs required reporting, or they didn't have a lot of drop downs. So there may have only been a couple languages. So, you know, they had to select other where more language options were not available when we originally started with our language access reporting. And so that has changed over time. And then we still have a number of programs that have unreported where individuals select to not provide that information. Now, speaking to that, within that ADSC profile, and I think that this will also get to the public comment at the beginning of this meeting, the 1% of our population, Aging and Disability Services population, and our programs that collect data are identified as Indigenous. And so that is American Indian and Alaska Native. We also have 1% that identify American Sign Language as their primary language. Again, going back to the fact that not all of our program data systems support collection of primary language or race and ethnicity. We do not have any data systems that support the collection of refugee status. So that is why we have some limitations in that data. We understand that there's a larger population of American Indian and Alaska Natives, as well as individuals with their primary language as American Sign Language, but that is from the data set that we have the capabilities to report on, as well as those individuals that are accessing services within Aging and Disability Services Division. So it's not the state in total or other divisions or departments outside of Aging and Disability Services Division. Within that, we identify in our plan all of the language access services that are provided, and within that also the components of meeting a qualified and competent provider. So within those services, that includes oral interpretation of services, sign language interpreter services. Underneath that sign language, you have your a multitude of those options like relay, cart. And so we go through that in detail within the actual plan. This does include within the language access services, written language services. So we identify all of our vital documents by program for translation. We used safe harbor thresholds to do our plan and our translations. A safe harbor threshold is when you have a 5% or more of a specific program population, then that becomes the language that meets safe harbor thresholds. For Aging and Disability Services Division, looking at our prior slides, we have a total population by our program of 7% that are Spanish speaking that meet that safe harbor thresholds. So when we do our vital document translations, all documents will be translated into Spanish on the front end. And then any other languages will be met upon request. We also identify within our written languages the importance of the public notice process in those languages. Our language access services is baked into our community outreach and engagement effort. So when we are going out into a community, there is specifics within our policy and our plan about making sure that we are looking at our demographics and our population that we're serving to make sure that we're providing materials in those languages and or translators and interpreters with us when we're going out on those community outreach efforts. We've also identified within the plan specifics around alternative language access. Thank you to the commission for the last report when we did to you guys, and you provided information to us about where you'd really like to see those legislative recommendations go and a gap in our plan. So we did make sure that as we built that plan, we had identified those alternative language access criteria. Okay, so this slide represents within our plan where we're at in meeting compliance with vital document translation. So as anybody knows, when a new law comes out or new regulation comes out, there is a period for which it takes time to be able to ramp up and to meet full compliance, understanding that there are legitimate limitations at the onset of any new law or regulation. So as of today, as of this last year of reporting that we did when we finalized this plan for state fiscal year 23, 36% of all vital documents were translated into safe harbor language. The progress has really been dependent upon available funding and qualified translation services. So when the law first passed and our first plan was due, that period did not line up with everything that we needed to be able to determine for our full budget impact. So we were unable to submit a funding request when we did our first plan. We have since been able to move forward with some of that funding, and then we'll continue to address our funding needs in the upcoming budget build. The data does not account for translations of vital documents at an individual level. So many of our programs operate on care plans or individual specific health or social service information for an individual. Those are what we do on an individual basis. So while we might be able to have all of our vital documents like applications translated or rights and responsibilities translated into Spanish, as an individual comes forward and we complete their individual care plan and they make a request to have it translated into their preferred language, those translations are done on a single basis. We will, as part of the last legislative session, there was a one-shot appropriation marked for all state agencies to be able to access in state fiscal year 25. So Aging and Disability Services Division does have a pending work program, and we'll be seeking approval at the interim finance committee to be able to bring in those funds to be able to continue to support our vital document translations. The graph or the pie chart represents the programs. So Adult Protective Services have 75% of their vital documents translated into safe harbor languages. The Autism Treatment Assistance Program is at 60%. Developmental Services is at 12%. The Long-Term Care Ombudsman Program is at 100%. Nevada Early Intervention Services is at 60%. Office of Consumer Health Assistance is at 0%. The Office of Community Living, Home and Community-Based Services is at 44%, and Office of Community Living, Planning and Advocacy is at 50%. I do want to caveat that the percentages have been based on not only the dependency on available funding, but many programs are also in the process of some changes. And so as their forms are developed or as their forms are revised, we'll be having those translated. What we did not want to do is, since we have such limited funding, is if we translated something and then those documents would change, we didn't have the funding to translate them again. So we wanted to make sure that we got the materials updated and then also do the translation with the funding availability. And it is a process. We will continue to work towards full compliance. The law also requires that you're addressing your recruitment and retention of interpreters. So the division follows fair and equitable hiring practices that are outlined in state law and the Department of Administration's Human Resources. All efforts are made to recruit qualified dual role interpreters to meet the needs. And we leverage state contracts for interpreters and translation services to the extent funding is available to augment those staffing resources. Commission alluded to this in your recent presentation, as well as the interim, that access is really dependent on those qualified professional individuals. And we have a workforce shortage in both bilingual individuals as well as American Sign Language interpreters. So, that is something that the agency is feeling with the rest of the state and trying to be able to move that mark and increase the access. So you see that we have made some progress since state fiscal year 21 to state fiscal year 23. We've gone from 38 individuals employed that are bilingual for our agency up to 67. And we continue to improve those efforts. But also identify that there's an additional limitation here, that there's not a specific certification program available in Nevada for becoming a bilingual interpreter or written translations. So there are some national certifications, but until we see, increased access there and options available, that does impede our ability to meet the demands. Okay. Along with recruitment comes training. And so the plan outlines our policies and procedures to include training on our language access plan and our policies for new employee onboarding. We have position-specific training. So for instance, an administrative assistant or an intake coordinator who might answer those phones or work with individuals that walk into the office. Their training might be specific around their I Speak cards, making sure that they're asking the questions on preferred language at the front end of those conversations. We have also incorporated our language access plan into regular training provided by programs with annual refreshers and for a review and acknowledgement annually. So I've talked about our limitations throughout, but we will continue to work towards full compliance with language access services and have considered the following limitations as part of our implementation plan. Addressing our system limitations. Like I said, we've been able to maximize funding through the American Rescue Act plan. Most of those systems that we leverage funding on will deploy over the next coming year. And then the dual role interpreter certification and access to qualified and competitive workforce and funding. This slide represents the implementation and evaluation. So we have made a lot of progress since 2022, but we still have work to do around our vital document translations, as well as the qualified workforce and the deployment of those data set or those software system so that we can access all the necessary data. At a minimum, we will review and evaluate and update our language access plan around our population data, our vital documents, any formal complaints or issues and concerns that are brought to our attention to be able to continue to work towards compliance. We will conduct periodic quality assurance reviews, conduct surveys, and solicit feedback. And then as part of this too, like I said, we will submit funding requests in accordance with the law as needed on every biennium. And then these legislative recommendations were put into our original language access plan, and they remain the same as of today. And then obviously we want to solicit comment and feedback on others that we need to consider. So aligning the requirements within existing federal federal language plan requirements. So there is some differences between what's required federally and at the state level, making some of that reporting different, or what's required by federal. We may not be able to get to the same level of information at the state level. So that alignment would help support compliance. Definitions on parameters of English proficiency levels. So it just says you have to collect English proficiency levels, but what is that? Is that age? Is that, you know, education level? Is it grade level? Is it high, medium, low? We've seen differences between programs and federal regulations about what they require for reporting. So some definitions and those parameters would be supportive. Revisions to dual role interpreter qualifications. So it just says tested and trained.
Sorry to interrupt. If you just give us a moment, we're going to switch interpreters.
Sure.
Go right ahead.
Sorry, I was looking at my presentation slide, so I apologize. Yeah, so you know, what are those qualifications? It's not very clear, and I think that there's a lot of room for interpretation there. So to be able to support individuals and ensuring that needs are met, I think having those qualifications clearly outlined would support all to meeting compliance. And then language access services for individuals who are deafblind, or nonverbal are also not clearly identified within the law. So these are not necessarily my recommendations. These are the recommendations that we have seen come from our last solicitation of feedback from programs specifically, and then as language access coordinator, I'm just the voice to those items that will be identified in our plan. I'd like to also point out too that we heard the commission last time that we did this, and really we appreciated that information around the gaps in the law, and how even though there might be a gap in the law, Aging and Disability Services Division could take those efforts, right, to ensure that language access services are supporting individuals that are deafblind and nonverbal. We are currently in the process of a web page modernization, and we are understanding at this time that with that modernization we will have some additional system functions. So we are working with our communication access services program and our public information officer that when that new system comes online, that we will be able to add videos to our web page to include just a short, like 1 to 2 minute video of a program overview or of our agency overview in American Sign Language onto our web page to be able to support visual language access. And we're because we definitely heard that comment, and that remains a comment we are in agreement with and working towards. Okay, so that is the end of the formal presentation. I believe that I have hit on the comments from public comment as well, but I would just like to open this up for questions. There is also my contact information on the following slide, and I will go ahead and stop screen sharing so that I can be available for questions and you can see me.
This is Eric for the record. Thank you, Shannon. And I'll invite members of the commission to turn their cameras on and prepare some questions. While they're doing that, we did get a question in the chat from Shelley from a member of the community, but I think it gets to the essence of the practical matter that I think ASL users are going to be asking is, from what I understand from your presentation, there isn't necessarily a trigger that says all documents will get translated into ASL necessarily, but if a community member is trying to understand some document related to their rights or services that they want to access and they need help interpreting that, where do they go? Because back when we had a functioning deaf center, they would go to the deaf center, and there would be deaf native signers there to help them interpret that document. Is there a system in place or an idea for a system in place for somebody in that situation?
So that's a very good question. Within the law, the agency and the services that we provide, right, we have to comply with that law. So if we're providing a direct service, then it is our responsibility for addressing those translations into the parameters for which we established, right? For those contracted entities, so we're not providing the service, but we're providing the funding and contract with another entity to provide that service, either through a contract or a grant. Then within the contract language and within our grant awards, it is that they must comply with Nevada law, right? And so it becomes that agency's responsibility to address translations and those needs. Again, they will establish their own thresholds on how they want to produce those, what they deem as a vital document, and then also how they manage those translations, right? And so while in your case, you are correct, if they're for Aging and Disability Services Division, if they're not meeting that safe harbor threshold, then it's upon request. And then ultimately the agency has a responsibility to carry out that translation for that individual and to help support them with the review and understanding of that document.
Shannon, this is Jamie, the interpreter. To clarify, or just to make sure, what you're saying is if someone requests something to be interpreted, then it is the responsibility of the agency to provide it.
Correct. That is to provide the meaningful access, right, in the preferred language. Eric, did that answer your question?
Yeah, this is Eric for the record. I guess I think so. I mean, I think the feedback we're getting from the community is that the limited, I presume this is related to the limited ASL proficiency within the Nevada Care Connection system, that this isn't something that has functioned that well. But if I understand correctly, what you're saying is that if there is a vital document in within the Aging and Disability Services Division, anybody from the community could ask that ADSD provide an ASL interpretation of that document, correct?
Correct. And that is for vital documents within our programs and services where we provide direct services, like the programs I listed: early intervention services, autism treatment assistance, our waivers, those that we grant funding out to, and then they operate their own programs, those requests would be made to those programs directly.
Gotcha.
If those programs are not meeting those requests, then I would ask that those are reported to the agency as the language access coordinator, so that I can work with our unit that funds them to address the requirements to be able to meet those needs.
Okay, so this is Eric. So I guess the message we're getting from the community at this moment is that there's some discussion that needs to happen within ADSD and the Communication Access Services Program.
Yes, I'm seeing that.
To address that that gap. And I guess I would say, as a practical matter, even if it was not a a grantee document, but an official government document. Back in the days of the Deaf Center is probably where a community member would have gone and said, hey, I'm trying to access this service, or, you know, and it wouldn't just be disability services, could be the DMV or the, and you know, that was part of the access to services, which is why it was so vital to have deaf and culturally competent employees at the Deaf Center, which was a point we tried to make back in the days when the grant money was given to Nevada Care Connection. So I think that point is still there, and I think there's still clearly a struggle for the communication access services program around having that cultural and language competency for helping the community access services from disability through all state services.
Correct. And like I said, any complaint that is regarding to Aging and Disability Services Division around your language access can be sent to me directly. It's at my email address, which I will make sure that Lorraine gets and puts back out here, but it's Shannon, SHANNONI at adsd.nv.gov. For other agencies like the DMV or Welfare and Supportive Services, you have to reach out to those agencies directly and to their language access coordinator, or they typically have a file a complaint at the bottom of their webpage that you can address that there.
Thank you. Or I would say, this is Eric again, or I would say utilize the access to services through the CAS program, which is what that program is, what I assume access to services is supposed to mean, is support accessing those services. Thanks for that clarification. I appreciate it. And before I yield the floor to Eli, let me just say briefly for the record to reflect that Ryan Feldman has now joined the meeting. Hi, Ryan. With that, then, Eli, do you want to go ahead?
Good morning, this is Eli for the record. Shannon, what I understand, any individual who comes to you have a document translated in ASL language. Am I correct understanding that?
Eli, this is Shannon for the record. Not to me directly for a document to be translated. So you will work with the program directly. So if you are, let's say, receiving services for the Autism Treatment Assistance Program, you would work with your case manager within that program to say, I need these documents translated, right? Or if you're working with early intervention services, any one of our programs, you're working with those programs. It's their responsibility upon request to be able to translate those documents into your preferred language. If those requests are not met, then you would file your complaint with me as a language access coordinator to help resolve that. So we want the programs have that responsibility, right? They are the direct line to the individual who's accessing those services. And then the language access coordinators are there to be able to support that compliance and then be able to help individuals navigate who are having a hard time getting the access that they need for their specific program and agency. And then that's really our first point, is to try, like, right, we always want to address complaints at the lowest level possible and then help you navigate your way through that, so that we can help you meet your needs and make sure that language access is meaningful and available to all.
Thank you. Another question for you. The election is just around the corner. You will provide any services for those people who need to have their ballot translated in their preferred language?
Thank you, Eli, for your question. This is Shannon for the record. We do not translate the voter registration documents. That would be that agency that oversees the voter registration that would have that responsibility.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Yes, it's the Secretary of State. Thank you.
This is Eric for the record. Any other questions from members of the commission for Shannon? Okay. I'm not seeing any. Thank you so much for coming and giving that. And just let me reiterate, I believe you said at the beginning of your presentation that the actual plan for Aging and Disability Services Division is going to be released soon. Is that correct? And
Yes, we're working on a remediation of the document now and then plan to have it posted by the end of next week. And we'll leave that posted for 30 days for public comment. And I'll be happy to share that link with Obioma to send out to the commission, but it will be on the adsd.nv.gov homepage once that is made public.
okay, great. Thank you very much,
Thank you
Shannon,
much.
and for your presentation. Let's move on then to item 5 of the agenda. This is the election of the chair and the vice chair. So I will hand it off to Obioma to lead us through that.
Hello, this is Obioma for the record. First, I'd just like to thank Shannon for coming to present today. And congratulations. Congratulations on your new journey with your name change and everything. I didn't recognize, and I was like, who is that? Who is that? And I saw who you were, and I was like, ah, now that makes sense. All right. So today we have a very unique meeting. We are going to run our election for the following year. I'm going to have all 3 candidates remain on screen, so you can keep your cameras on, and everyone else, if we can have you turn your cameras off at this time. As is stated in our bylaws, the elections happen annually, and this has to happen by the 1st of June. So this meeting is the first meeting that is occurring before the 1st of June. So last year, unfortunately, we started late. So this year we are on track and doing this in a timely manner. So that's excellent. So we have 3 nominations. We have Eric Wilcox, we have Susan Beckett, and we have Catherine Nielsen. These are 3 nominations, and they have accepted these nominations. And each person will be able to proceed with a brief 5-minute presentation. And you have the option of a PowerPoint or not. And we'll go ahead and we'll have you each take a turn. Typically, we will proceed with the president, then the vice president, or chair and vice chair, excuse me, I'm sorry. However, in this situation, all 3 of you have chosen, are nominated for both roles, correct? Yes. So we're gonna go ahead and go in ABC order. We're just gonna go in alphabetical order based on your name. So we will start with Catherine Nielsen. Catherine, you're up first with that C. And the other candidates, please go ahead and turn your cameras off. And Catherine, do you have a PowerPoint that you would like to share?
I do have a PowerPoint. Catherine, for the record, let me make sure I'm able to share. It looks like I am able to share my screen. So let me start my PowerPoint and then share my screen. Hopefully you are seeing the main PowerPoint screen. It does look like that. So my name's Catherine Nielsen.
Hi, Catherine, I can see that. And if you hold on just one moment, this is Obioma.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go ahead and turn my camera off, and then you can go ahead and start your presentation. Thank you so much for your patience. Hold on one second. Okay, Catherine, you can go right ahead.
Wonderful. Hi, everybody. This is Catherine Nielsen. Obviously, I think most of everybody on this meeting today is familiar with me. I'll start this with, if I had known our current chair and vice chair were nominated, I probably just would have let them continue their amazing leadership. So I am very happy and excited that somebody felt that my current contribution to the commission was welcomed enough that you also nominated me for chair and vice chair. So if you feel that I am the best candidate, I would gladly accept either position. However, there are no hard feelings because I do believe Eric and Susan have done an amazing job. However, I put together a slideshow. So this is me. I am on for those that may be visually impaired, the main screen contains 2 photos. The one on the upper left is me with my current staff. We were at the Capitol in Washington, D.C. I'm on the far right. I am a 30-something woman who is Caucasian with long brown hair, and I use she, her pronouns. On the right-hand side is a photo of me with my family, and I have 3 daughters. I know that my husband is outnumbered, and my husband's on the right. One of my daughters has type 1 diabetes and other disabilities. My husband has a significant brain condition, and they removed a quarter of his brain in 2022. So I have a lot of background in different disabilities. I'm going to change my thing. So I have some personal experience that I think would speak well to being your chair or your vice chair. Obviously, my personal experience, I went through a lot of different ear infections and surgeries as a child. So I was in and out of my ear, nose, and throat doctor for many, many years, to the point that we had a personal connection with their cell phone so we could call. I lost my hearing in my left ear while I was pregnant with my second daughter. Coincidentally, I was playing on the playground with her, and I flipped upside down on the monkey bars, and my hearing in my left ear went almost immediately. My hearing in my right did come back about 50%, but my hearing in my left ear has never returned because they determined that I had enlarged vestibular aqueducts, and the one in my left ear ruptured. So I am completely deaf in my left ear and hard of hearing in my right. I do have hearing aids, but I know that some of you people, or some of you will all agree with me, and some of you will not, that I cannot stand my hearing aids because I have one ear that does not really use the function of the hearing aid. I often forget my left hearing aid, and my right one does not work as well when it can't talk to my left one. So I have some professional experience as well. I was a teacher's assistant for a special education classroom in high school before I became a direct support staff for several years, where I went into homes and helped provide services to many different types of individuals with disabilities. I was an admin for the PACE unit, which is Preparedness, Assurance, Inspections, and Safety, before I was a psychiatric caseworker in Fallon. Then I joined where I'm at now, which is the Governor's Council on Developmental Disabilities. I went through a couple of different roles before I became the executive director over here. I'm also the president of the board for Nevada Disability Advocacy and Law Center. And I'm a member of their protection and advocacy for individuals with mental illness. I'm a member of various other councils, but I felt like this really spoke well to what we are seeing here today. I have a bachelor's in applied behavioral science, a master's in public administration, and I'm a PhD candidate for philosophy and human services. There's a really questionable photo of me on the screen where I am testifying at the legislature, but screen grabs are not always the prettiest. But I wanted to show you all that I have a lot of background in legislative and policy work. I have testified over 100 times at the legislature. I'm proficient in writing testimony and policy statements. And I have many connections locally within our state and federally. So what makes me a good candidate to chair or vice chair this commission based off of not necessarily my professional or personal background that you've already heard about, but I am passionate about deaf and hard of hearing, and not just because I myself am hard of hearing, because I feel like this community has been oppressed for long enough. And it's one community that is highly overlooked in a sense that they don't feel, a lot of people assume and don't take the actual opportunity to learn about what this community truly needs. And I am strong against adversity and challenges. If any of you watched the testimony from last week, you will see that it is not always easy to stand up against adversity, but I'm willing to do so with passion and strength. I have other strengths. I do a lot of research, and I am very passionate about research and data. It's something that lights my fire, and I love to do research. It helps me with a lot of political jargon because that is something that most people do not understand, whether you have degrees all the way up to being a doctor or a lawyer, or you have 0 degrees and no experience in the legislature. It is very confusing, and I'm pretty good at understanding what that means. I also track legislation throughout all of the legislative sessions. So any bill that impacts the disability community, deaf and hard of hearing, councils or commissions, I'm tracking those actively. And I think that that speaks well to what we are trying to do here with policy change. And I try to get it done no matter what. Again, speaking to the session that happened last week, it's not always easy. And it does take a very strong individual. Your current chair was there as well, and we are willing to get it done no matter what. So that is my presentation. And like I stated, I am very well aware that you guys have amazing leadership in your executive director and your current chair and vice chair. So there are 0 hard feelings if you choose to continue through using your chair and your vice chair. If you have any questions, I don't know how we are currently leading the presentations, Obiama, if we're asking questions now or later. But if you have questions, please let me know.
And just one moment while we switch interpreters.
Thank you so much, Catherine. So, wow, I learned new things about you today. It was beautiful, beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing. So, before we start kind of voting here, I want to take a break before that, right? Because we're actually past the hour. So I am so sorry. When we come back, we will do the questions briefly, and then what we'll do is we'll have our second and third candidates present, okay? Awesome. Thank you. And with that, we will take a 10-minute break. Come back at 10:16. 10:16. Okay, we can have all the commissioners go ahead and turn their cameras on. Make sure that everyone is in fact here. Perfect. 1, 2, 3, 4, 7. There we go. All right, we will go ahead and continue with our election here. So that is agenda item number 5. So we just heard Catherine's presentation. She was talking about herself and why she is running. So are there any questions for Catherine before we proceed?
This is Eric in the chat, Obioma.
Yes, I was just, yes. Question in the chat, Eric, if you wouldn't mind, go ahead and reiterating.
Yeah, so Catherine, with all the other duties, responsibilities you have currently, if elected, how do you plan to ensure sufficient time dedicated to the commission and being an officer in the commission?
That's a great question, Laura. This is Catherine for the record. So I already have a goal within my 5-year state plan that's dedicated a significant chunk of my time to working alongside of the commission to advance your guys' goals and objectives. So regardless of whether or not I'm elected as an officer, I still plan to continue to allot that time to serving the commission and advancing your efforts.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Catherine. Any other questions? All right, seeing none, we will go ahead and proceed with the next candidate. That will actually be, oh, yes, Eric. Will the other commissioners go ahead and turn off your cameras at this time? All right,
Okay.
and Eric, do you have a PowerPoint or are you just doing a presentation?
This is Eric for the record. I do not have a PowerPoint.
Okay.
I'm overloaded with PowerPoints at work, so
Sounds good. All right, you may proceed.
thank you, Obioma. This is Eric Wilcox for the record. I am currently chair of the commission. I am a parent of a deaf child, for those of you who don't understand why I'm here. My daughter Lucy is 11 years old. She's in middle school in the Washoe County schools. She was born with a severe to profound bilateral hearing loss. She uses both oral and spoken English as well as ASL, mostly receptively. She uses ASL and expresses herself mainly with her voice. She's typical of most of the families with a deaf kid. She was born into a hearing family. Neither my wife nor I are deaf. She also has an older brother who is 18 years old, who is also hearing. And in the advocacy work that I've done with families, I've come to understand that this is the way it is for a large majority of the deaf kids. They're born into hearing families, and that's been part of the challenge that we've faced in terms of raising a deaf kid. I got into this work through Nevada Hands and Voices. Our family became members of Nevada Hands and Voices almost as soon as our daughter was born. I was asked to join the board of directors of Nevada Hands and Voices. So this was quite some years ago. I was on the board. And then for 4 or 5 years, I served as chair and president of the board of directors of Nevada Hands and Voices. That was a volunteer role. And that was right in the years when the Deaf Centers of Nevada was active, and we were working as a subgrantee under the Deaf Centers of Nevada. So I spent a lot of time in the offices of the Deaf Centers of Nevada, working alongside the staff there, working with the staff of Nevada Hands and Voices on integrating the services that Nevada Hands and Voices was providing with the services that Deaf Centers of Nevada was operating. I worked heavily on the proposals for the funding that both for the Deaf Centers of Nevada at times, as well as funding for Nevada Hands and Voices through the Aging and Disability Services Division. So I say all this just to convey that I have a long history in particularly the Communication Access Services program and how it's implemented by ADSD and how those services could and should be delivered. And I do a fair amount of advocacy work, not nearly as much as Catherine does, but I have testified in front of the legislature on a number of occasions and done a fair amount of community outreach as well on behalf of the commission and the community. Let me just finish by saying that I am not a deaf person. And I have tried to be very careful in how I pursue my advocacy and not to represent myself as having lived the experience because I have not. And I have said each time that I've been nominated for this, that in my view, the Deaf Commission should ultimately be chaired by somebody who is deaf or hard of hearing. It has been my pleasure to serve. I will continue to serve. So I will continue to serve, and I'm happy to do so if I am elected. And with that, I will end there. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you so much, Eric. Other commissioners, go ahead and turn your cameras on. Excellent. All right, any questions for Eric? All right, seeing none, we will go to our final candidate here, Susan Beckett. Yep, we'll go ahead and have the other commissioners turn off their cameras.
Good morning, everyone. I want to take a moment and thank everyone. I did not prepare a PowerPoint, and I am honored to have been nominated. However, at this time, I am going to be withdrawing from both chair and vice chair. It is my strong belief that we have two amazing candidates. I like how the commission has been going. I feel like the deaf and hard of hearing communities are on a strong path. I think, and this is just my opinion, that Eric Wilcox is an amazing writer. The way he writes comes from a point of passion, dedication, and he truly cares about the community. I have watched Catherine. I saw her presentation. I watched a YouTube video that was over 2 hours long. I watched her testify. I like the way she speaks. So for me, my best judgments of this commission, I know Eric feels that it should be led by a deaf or hard of hearing person. I disagree with that. I think his expertise in what we've been going through, he needs to continue as chair, and Catherine to step in as vice chair. And this is because they both have the passions, the care, the concerns of our community at heart. I am a deaf senior, hard of hearing at best. I care about what happens to our community, to our children, to our future. And with that being said, I think we have two phenomenal candidates. Can't speak. Two phenomenal candidates. It gives us some slight change. I'm not leaving the commission. Please understand this. It will allow me to dedicate more time in the legislative subcommittee. We need this. We need some slight change, but yet to keep up the momentum we've built. So please realize that I'm not withdrawing because of anything other than we have two phenomenal candidates, and I have been proud to serve. So please, I'm asking you to not vote for me, but to vote for Eric or Catherine. The leadership will be amazing. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Appreciate your words and your authenticity and your transparency, I would say. Yes, thank you so much for that. All right, so I'm not going to have the commissioners ask questions because obviously you are withdrawing. So with that, Susan, we're good. So at this point, we're going to go ahead and move forward with our voting. This will actually be done through the Zoom electronic voting. You can actually see it real time as it's happening. So at this time, you do have two candidates to choose. We have Catherine Nielsen and we have Eric Wilcox. They are both running for chair and vice chair. At this time, I would ask that our admin, Lorraine, to go ahead with the election piece or the voting, please. Please do not vote if, wait 1 second, sorry, I missed that. Don't vote if what? If you are not a commissioner. Only commissioners can be voting at this time, please. And with that, proceed with your vote. Thank you. Okay. It looks like we do have full 7 participants, right? All 7? Make sure. Okay. So what I see, y'all can see, right? All right. So Eric is our reappointed chair, and Catherine is our newly appointed vice chair. Thank you, everybody, for participating in the election.
Okay, this is Eric for the record. Thank you, everybody, for your support and your vote of confidence on the leadership of the commission. Thank you, Susan, for your service as vice chair for the past few years. Susan's been an incredible advocate for the community, often sort of working quietly behind the scenes, but she's been a committed and dedicated servant to our community. I'm glad she's remaining on the commission and going to continue to do the advocacy work she's doing, just not as vice chair. And welcome, Catherine. Forward to working with Catherine. Catherine, as we know, is kind of a force of nature when it comes to this work on behalf of the disabled community. So I think we're grateful to have her on the commission and grateful to have her as our vice chair. Okay. With that, let us move on to item 6 of the agenda. This is the review of the annual report and the executive director's recommendations for proposed state plan priorities. And let me just warn everybody that Obioma has asked that we vote at the end of this on her recommendations. So pay attention to that, because we will be voting at the end of this in order to approve the guidance for our executive director. Obioma, go ahead.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Eric. This is Obioma for the record. All right, y'all should have a copy of the materials that we provided for this discussion today. So all of the initial data actually came from our October town hall, which was done last year. We did a touring kind of town hall. We went to 2 different places, or 3. We went to Pahrump, Reno, and Las Vegas. The polls that we received from the community here shows within the data, which is right here, all right here. It's roughly 30 pages of comment, feedback, concerns, and just feelings overall from the totality of the states. From that and the spreadsheet of information, there was an analysis done, and we put this into the annual report that was made for you all. That was made available, the full, I would say, wait, how many pages? Let me see. 22, here we go. 22 pages is the full report about what feedback was received for the commission's activity and the town hall, all of it compiled. So feel free to take a look through this if you need more information, or that was used in ASL. If you need ASL translation, please let me know. We'll be more than happy to clarify anything that you need clarifying on. Because what we did is 22 pages and it's lengthy. And this is what we created. This is the highlights version. The main points of activity, the main points of feedback, the main points of my priorities and the recommendations thereof from the state plan. Today, what I am asking is for y'all to take a look at my recommendations. And you can find those recommendations here we go, on page 21 of the full report. So as your executive director, my recommendations are that 1, you prioritize the state plan. There are 3 recommendations from that plan. One recommendation, the first recommendation, there's recommendation number 5 and recommendation number 6. And I will expand on each one. Nope. Yes. All right. So this is to include, number 1 talks about the community, to include the community and things that are related to continuing community engagements, whether that's through a town hall, whether that's through a discussion, a table discussion, general deaf awareness of events, increased legislative advocacy, to be prepared for services that are needed, direct services model, which include the culture, the understanding found in the deaf schools, found in deaf centers, given center is nationwide. And so we like to apply that here. The second one, which is recommendation number 5, which is healthcare, access to healthcare, increasing ADA compliance, which is a requirement. Accountability across the state to make sure that we increase healthcare hospitals and services for communication access, deaf and hard of hearing mental health services, healthcare networking expansion. And then my last recommendation is actually from number 6, which is language development. Immediate intervention for deaf and hard of hearing education, for post-secondary education for student services and early intervention, advocacy for language development. We have seen time and time again across the state over the span of 2 years, the need for our education to improve. I don't understand why this is not happening. There is a strong emphasis on this. This needs to happen now. We cannot put this off any later. And again, just making sure that our LAP, the Language Access Plan, is in fact robust, meaning it is detailed, very inclusive, and what needs to be done needs to be reflected for the community in this LAP. And not just a piece of paper that it says what we need to do, but actually doing the work. Enforcement, qualification, and even audits. We want to do audited checks of the activity for IEPs, compliance, education plans, the needs, the instruction to staff who are supporting, and we're talking about across the gamut. We're not trying to just talk and plan, but we also want to see the action behind the talking and the planning. Those 3 are my current recommendations. Again, this is from the data we've seen from the community and this report that was compiled. These are the 3 that have been mentioned time and time again throughout all of the town halls. So my recommendation here is that we get approval and move forward so that we can focus and strengthen the upcoming year with these 3 recommendations. We'll do, yes, Laura. Laura here, I've got a question. For number 6, the third one that you mentioned, and that has to do with the LAP, does that mean ADSD's LAP, or is this for each department under the state of Nevada? Because there are different agencies and they all are supposed to have their own. So I just wanted clarification. Obioma here. Thank you so much for the clarification and the question. This is Obioma for the record. I understand this is a big undertaking. However, the feedback that was received from all of the town halls, it's not just ADSD. It is, in fact, all state agencies. So we need to focus not only just one agency, but we need to focus on them all. Laura here. I agree. Thank you so much. Obioma here. Any other questions?
But this is Eric for the record. Actually, I just wanted to make a comment specifically about the community engagement element of this. And I'm just offering this as like a vote of confidence and about the approach that you and the commission have taken in the past couple of years. Because we've gotten comments from the community, for example, recently at a town hall, you know, you host these town halls and the community comes and they give you all these complaints and then nothing ever happens. And what I wanted to say to address this is that in spite of the sort of skeptical nature of that comment, I think that the level of community engagement and the increase in the level of community engagement that this commission has executed in the last couple of years, instead of just every few years doing a town hall, but doing 2 cycles of town halls every year, it's been incredibly valuable. And we've made a lot more progress in terms of getting a sense of what the recurring and consistent problems are that aren't getting better over time. And we've made huge progress in terms of networking between the commission and the other agencies and nonprofits in the state. And the reality is the commission is 11 or 12 volunteers who most of whom have day jobs and don't do this work professionally. So, you know, we're not going to solve these problems just ourselves in the commission. And in fact, we don't even really have any authority except to get invitations to testify to the legislature or whatever. We can just make recommendations to the state. So this level of engagement that we have been pursuing with the community, I think has been vital in building some momentum towards translating what have been general complaints into action moving forward. And that's not easy. It's one of the things that I've learned doing this. It's not easy or obvious how to do that. And we're sort of struggling in some cases to do it, and it's not happening anywhere near as fast as people would like. But if we scale back the level of community engagement that we're doing, I think we'll progress even slower because it's these communications and these linkages to all the nonprofits and creating events where state agency representatives feel that they have to come and hear what the community is saying, that these kinds of events are really what is building the momentum. And so that's just a sort of vote of support for the strategy that's been advanced in the last couple of years.
All right, this is Obioma for the record. Thank you, Eric, for your comments. Do we have any more questions or comments at this time before we ask for a motion to be made? Okay, at this time, I don't see anyone who wants to make a comment or ask a question. I'm going to ask for a motion. Laura Fussell? Excuse me, hold on a second. This is Laura Fussell for the record. I motion that we accept the recommendations that were presented by our executive director at this time for the Deaf Commission. Eli?
This is Eli for the record. I'd like to second the motion to approve the recommendation.
Is there any further discussion at this time? I don't see anyone. We'll go ahead and proceed with the vote.
All in favor?
All in favor?
Raise your hand. Okay, motion is approved.
Excellent. Thank you, Eric.
Okay, this is Eric Wilcox for the record. That was item 6, so we will move on to item 7. This is discuss and decide on the content and approval of position statements intended for use by the commission during the legislative session. Let me just preface by saying this is sort of vital for us to sort of articulate this and have a vote, and because that allows those of us who say meet with legislators or testify in public to say that we are representing the point of view of the commission, not just as individuals. And that's why we want to go through this step in a somewhat formal process. My understanding is that the list that is in the meeting materials was sort of an outgrowth of the work that the legislative subcommittee has been doing. And so I'll invite Eli to kind of make some remarks about the position statements.
This is Eli for the record. Thank you, Eric. What we have decided to do with the legislative subcommittee has decided to create a position that where we stand as a commission. So therefore, we can present this to legislators saying, we would like your help. We would like you to help us to support the following position. And they have a chance to pick what they would like to support. And I would assume, if Catherine, you may correct me, is that once they decide which position they want to make, then we will do the follow-up detail work to determine why we need support in that particular position. That to allow the legislators, they 15 of them, and they can pick 1 or 2 or none. It's a crapshoot. Catherine, do you have anything you'd like to add?
So this is Catherine Nielsen for the record. The main purpose of the position statements really allows the commission to take the time now to have those thorough discussions about where the commission lands on the various topics, so that when a bill comes up next legislative session, we don't have to wait until the next meeting to get approval to make comments on these topics, because Obiama or whomever will be taking that opportunity, maybe it will be Eric or myself, maybe it's another commissioner, will have a thorough guided document that will say the commission's position on, let's say, deaf schools is this. And therefore, when you make a comment at the legislature, because we are not permitted to lobby, we are permitted to educate, and we can provide information on what is the status of deaf schools in Nevada and what are the recommendations of the commission to either improve deaf schools or whatever it may be on the various topic. But it allows us now to have those discussions so that we don't have to miss any opportunities to provide education on behalf of the community. Hopefully that's what you were looking for, Eli.
Thank you.
Yes.
Good job.
This is Obioma for the record. I would love it if we could go ahead and share screen so you can see exactly what we're talking about at this point. So I'm going to ask that we take a moment to go ahead and look at the share screen. Okay, if you could scroll down so we could, there you go. Okay, we can go ahead and turn off the share screen. So Susan, I'm sorry, I saw your hand. Go ahead. Sorry, Eli. I'm sorry, Eli, for interrupting, Susan.
I had a couple of questions. first, is this in order in which our community is saying? No, okay, thank you, Eli. Second, are we going to elaborate as a commission, such as, I'm going to say, position on voting accessibility for people who are deaf or hard of hearing, and then a statement about that? Because some of these are very broad, and I want to make sure that there's no miscommunication for any commission members who happen to testify and possibly have our own ideas and shift it by accident that doesn't meet our community, because it's important we keep our community. And while I am late deaf, it's my ideas and thoughts are not the same as Big D. And I am representing Big D, so I need to hear what they say, and I want to make sure nothing gets lost in translation. So another thing I would like to suggest while we're accepting this is, number one, expand on it so that we're all crystal clear. And number two, possibly put it in the order in which our community is saying this. So if by chance some weird flip-flop thing happens and I get approached by a different assembly person that says, hey, Susan, what's needed out there? I can go, oh, this is a top priority. This is number one and nobody's touched it. We've got number two, but we don't have number one. So just a thought.
Okay, got a lot of hands. Okay, so Eli, it's your discussion. Who's next?
Okay, I'd let Catherine take the discussion on this one, and then I'll elaborate afterward.
Thank you, Eli. This is Catherine for the record. So first off, Susan, you are correct. This is in no way an order of priority. I just took some of the thoughts that Eli had kind of dictated from our past discussions within our legislative subcommittee and put them within broad titles. So for instance, yes, you did say that's pretty broad. But how we anticipate writing the position statements is that we will start with a generic draft. I'm going to do some research to kind of talk about what is the history of voting for people who are deaf and hard of hearing, where is our state now, and then we will come up with policy recommendations. And you guys will have the ample opportunity to discuss, make changes, suggest, and all of that. But that's the point of us doing it now. And you are exactly correct. Is this, the position statements will kind of give a guideline of how to write that testimony and make sure that the information they're including aligns with the position of the commission. But that list is not also exhaustive. So if you think there are other position statements that we should have, I would encourage you to let Eli know or make those suggestions, because we just tried to kind of make a recap of a way to where we can start with, but we definitely want to expand from here, if that makes sense. Thank you, Eli.
Thank you, Obiama.
And this is Obioma for the record. So I just want to make sure that I clarify that all of these position statements are from the community. And that was from our last engagement conference. That's where we collected this information. So yes, it is from the community. It's not something we just made up. It's not something we just put on a list. It was from the community, from that engagement conference. We had panel discussions, ongoing discussions in regards to new things that the community was facing. So that's what we were left with, what you see at the position statements. And this is also from our community partners as well. So this, again, is a broad conceptual idea of what the community is needing. And this is approved as our start, and then we'll be able to expand upon that.
Mr. Eli, thank you, Obiama, for that clarification. So I would like to take this opportunity to ask you if you would approve our position, so the subcommittee can go forward and expand that list, because I need to know where the commission is leading. If they like the approach that we're taking, they will take the next step. There's a lot of work to do this. So, any comment, any suggestion, how you would like to proceed?
This is, we can have a vote in a minute to approve the proceeding. But I did want to draw your attention to, there were a couple comments in the chat about things to keep in mind as we flesh out these, each of these items. Take note of what Dolores is suggesting in the chat there. Is there a motion from a member of the commission to approve this list of topics and for the legislative subcommittee to pursue filling in the details on these position statements? Laura, you can say so moved if you want.
This is Laura Fussell for the record, so moved.
Thank you. Is there a second for that motion? Second from Susan, thank you. Any other discussion or questions about the list of? Okay. All in favor of the motion, please signal by raising your hand. Okay, the motion passes. Thank you very much. Any other questions or comments on this? Thanks. We'll look forward to the legislative subcommittee, filling out some of the details on these as we move towards the legislative session. Where are we at? What do you think?
Number 8, Eric. However,
Yep.
before we proceed, this is Obioma for the record. Do you mind if we take a break for the accommodations team?
Yeah, let's do that now.
Okay, how about 10 minutes? We'll be back at 11:05.
Okay, thank you. So we will go ahead and proceed. Members of the commission, if you could turn your cameras on so we can make sure we're all here. We're going to move on to item 8 of the agenda, and this is a specific item that we wanted to highlight that came about from the town hall in Las Vegas. And some of the discussion that happened, I think, maybe afterwards, I presume for long hours afterwards. So there's always long discussion after our town hall meetings. And this is the public's request for a discussion and possible recommendations from the Deaf Commission to look into a civil lawsuit on behalf of the public against the medical community and/or Nevada hospitals for persistent alleged failure to provide deaf and hard of hearing interpreters for their patients. I will preface this, I was not present at that town hall. I wasn't able to make it to Las Vegas this time, as I usually do. I'll make a few remarks and then I'm going to hand it off to Obioma to expand. But let me just say that I have been to many town halls going back several years that the commission has held all over the state of Nevada. And this and education are the two issues that come up in every location in Nevada at every town hall. Everybody, it seems, no matter where you live in Nevada, has a story about trying to access healthcare in this state or access a hospital and not having proper accessibility for those who primarily use ASL as their primary language. This is a persistent problem. We have tried to draw attention to it, and there just is not anywhere near the level of urgency or awareness or effort to fix this problem. And so something needs to happen to really raise the temperature here in order to force particularly the medical establishment in the state of Nevada, to understand their obligations under the Americans with Disabilities Act. To address this, Obioma's done a little bit of research in the background to find out what some of the options are. I think the goal here is for us to discuss what some of the options might be, and to perhaps even vote on some kind of course of action that the commission can take to help move the ball forward on this issue. Obioma, do you want to go into a bit more detail on that?
Obioma here for the record. Thank you, Eric. So I actually, for those who went to the Las Vegas town hall, Susan, Laura, Eli, Lance, were all in attendance. So if y'all remember the community asking again, time after time, repeatedly about violations of the ADA when it comes to the hospitals, and can the commission do anything and act on this? So Eric, just to give a little bit of feedback, that it was actually during the town hall, it was after, it was in fact during the town hall. One of the final public comments there was of that. So it was a very strong request, and I want that to be recognized, that we really need to take into consideration the needs. And there are some options that are made available to us, but I just wanted to get the feedback from those that are here. Susan. Susan,
Go ahead,
Yes.
Susan.
go ahead.
Sorry about that. I have my dog in the background who decided to go nuts at this given moment. So it was brought up. I may have given misinformation because I was not aware that we were possibly able to do a class action lawsuit. And then I received information that could be contradictory to that. So it was brought up. That has been an issue for quite some time. And again, I agree with Eric in all the town halls that we have had, that there is an issue. I did suggest we possibly reach out to the ACLU at that time, because they are doing lawsuits that have included deaf and hard of hearing, such as the one with the Clark County Detention Center, that for deaf individual who's been there for, I believe it was 2 years, without access to ASL or services, that because of the fact that he was deaf. So if you have questions, please feel free to ask them. I was there, I remember it. It is an issue, and yes, maybe a class action lawsuit somehow or another would help, but I'm not familiar with that at all, and how it would happen through a state agency. And if we have the teeth in our NRS to back it.
Obioma here. So this is Obioma for the record. Absolutely correct, right? So we are affiliated with the state, so it does become a little bit tricky. There are boundaries. For us as a commission, what we can do with confidence, I'll say, is contact Equal Rights Commission with a formal grievance, and to educate the community on how to do the same. We could also reach out to the state licensing board for those agencies and for those hospitals, and make a formal grievance yet again, and present them with the education of what we have found with all of that data. The other thing that we can do is reach out to the Nevada Hospital Association. Again, educate them, give them all of the resources that they need, and let them know what the community is saying. Again, these are all grievances. These are fixes that need to happen. The fourth thing we can do is U.S. Federal Government Office of Civil Rights. File a formal grievance, educate the community on how to do the same, and present them with that data. We have to educate them. We have to let them know that this is what's happening in the state of Nevada. I actually recommend all of them. What people can do within the community is, or what we can do, is make a video on how to address these organizations, how to make a formal grievance. So it's not just the commission that's acting, but it's actually the community getting together and just flood these entities with information and feedback. It's not about staying quiet anymore. At this point, we need to make sure that we are heard. I understand that our NRS doesn't give teeth. However, we can be that continuous wheel of just flooding them with grievances until they listen. Other feedback, other comments?
Eli, go ahead.
This is Eli for the record. Eric, you're absolutely correct. There was a lot of complaints in the Las Vegas Town Hall meeting, especially with the ADA compliance violation, especially with the hospital. Someone had mentioned they were left out of the hallway, which I understand is illegal, and there was no communication with what was going on. And there was a lack of BRI in the hospital. And also lack of interpretive medical officers. A lot of the medical officers claim they don't have the budget for it, even though it's a violation of the ADA compliance. So my question is, number one, what I'm looking for, should we look into trying to get someone to address those ADA compliant violations first before we go to all these 4 venues that OPM had recommended? Or do we do it in conjunction? Because I think a lot of this stuff has to do with the violation of the ADA compliance. And we need to be able to, what I would love to see in an ideal situation is to get a compliance officer for the state of Nevada. And then we have a direct person to go to the hospital A is violating this, you need to look into it. But what would be the most logical way to go about that? I don't know.
Catherine, go ahead.
Catherine.
So this is Catherine for the record. We do have healthcare quality and compliance, which is HCQC. They are responsible for investigating medical facilities. So if you file a complaint, they review the complaint, and that is their role, is to ensure that they're following compliance. However, another opportunity is to reach out to the Nevada Disability Advocacy and Law Center and make mention of specific facilities. For instance, I'm not familiar with all of the hospitals in Las Vegas, but let's just say the Ronald McDonald Center is the hospital that you want to file a complaint against. You would reach out to the Nevada Disability Advocacy and Law Center and let them know, hey, this is what occurred, and then ask them if they're able to go in and investigate situations of compliance, neglect, or abuse. So I don't know. I wasn't at the Las Vegas town hall, so I don't know exactly the comments and if there was any information for that. I did see Shelley in the chat mentioned. So Kate is the acting executive director of that NDALC. But it looks like Shelley was stating that there were 57 people there last week. Her aide took notes and she's not sure about the next step. I can follow up with them to see what the next step would be as well, if that's something that you need me to do.
Abiyama here, for the record. So what I want to know from y'all is, from the 4 suggestions I suggested, which is all 4, is that worthwhile making those videos to the community, making sure that they can file those grievances? Can we actively do that currently, while still talking with ACLU still talk to, and Nevada Disability Advocacy Law Center, still kind of talking to all of that, but actively doing something more than just kind of saying, yeah, this is what we're doing. I don't want to talk the talk anymore. I kind of want to walk the walk.
Yeah, this is Eric. For the record, I'll go to you in just a second, Laura. I do want to draw attention if you want to see a list in writing. If you go to the director and chair's report, which is in the meeting materials on page 4 of that, Obioma's listed her recommendations there. Formal grievance with the Equal Rights Commission, formal grievance with state licensing board, or perhaps this hospital compliance agency that Catherine just mentioned, and a letter an advocacy letter to the Nevada Hospital Association, a formal grievance with the federal government of Office of Civil Rights, or perhaps the ACLU, as well as instructional videos for the community on how to file complaints. So that list is there. My suggestion would be that we move to approve pursuing all of those, and see if we can vote on approving the executive director pursuing drafting all of that with the help of the chair and the vice chair, because I think all of those would be useful. I did want to also mention that we did advocate as part of our presentation, or at least I tried to include in my remarks to the legislative committee last week, where we testified this issue of ADA compliance or lack of compliance as being a persistent comment that we've received at town halls. Healthcare is a big one. Also, persistent violations of the education law, the IDEA law, which is the education version of ADA, and that we really need some compliance sort of enforcement from the state level on this. So we did advocate for that, and I would encourage the legislative community to work that into the details of those position statements that we mentioned before, and as we ramp up our outreach to the legislative committee or individual legislators, that we talk to them about this need to enforce ADA in the state. Yeah, I think those were the main comments that I wanted to make. So I think we should, well, we can have more discussion, but we should entertain a motion soon. Laura, do you want to go ahead?
This is Laura for the record. My question to Obioma is, when it comes to creating that video, where are you going to post that video and share that information? Is it going to be mainly the commission website? Is that going to be enough backing, right? Is this going to need some social media attention? Like, how is the efforts of getting this information across? Because we have not had videos like this in the past.
And this is Obioma for the record. Thank you for your question, Laura. So what I would need to do is, first, I would have to get the approval from the commission, and then I can strategize how to approach that. I'm currently working on social media platforms, but that's an internal process of approval. Before that, we can use that, but we can also utilize the website as a possibility, but I would have to ask for permission to see if that is possible, that we could educate the community in that way. If not, we would utilize partners within the community to make sure that that information was disseminated in the community. And we also have our engagement conference as well. And so we want to make sure that we take the opportunity to emphasize the resources that can be provided for them. Eric?
Yeah, this is Eric for the record. 2 more points that I wanted to make. One, and there's some ongoing chat in the chat, so I encourage everybody to look there and read through that as well, because there's some good context there as well. Particularly the most recent comment from Dolores there about the difference between a grievance and a class action lawsuit, and that's an important distinction. There may be some limitations as far as what the commission can do in terms of actually participating in a class action lawsuit. We can certainly offline, behind the scenes, seek some legal guidance on how far we can go on that. But I think there's certainly no reason why we can't consider being an advocate in that process, filing friendly briefs, advocating on behalf. But probably a class action lawsuit is going to require some members of the community organizing and leading for a sort of community effort. On that front, also, I would say, and this has come up with this, it's also come up with education, where I know Catherine pursued what it would look like to file a complaint with the Justice Department on violations in the education space ongoing in Nevada. And what she was told there is that we need specific complaints. So it's not enough for us to just say, God, if we get this complaint all the time, there's all these people not receiving the accommodations that that the hospitals are required to give. I mean, it's good that we keep collecting these complaints and that we keep harping on this message, but in terms of a formal legal complaint, it's not enough for us to just give general complaints. We need individuals with specific complaints against specific hospitals with details about specific events, willing to come forward, document those details in a complaint. And that goes for the education as well. And I made this point in the education subcommittee, and the valid point was made. A lot of the complaints on the education side we're getting from people who work in the school district, and obviously they're worried about losing their job if they make a formal complaint by name. But we really need families to step up and file formal complaints in that space as well. So I'm just throwing that out there to the community, that anybody who is fired up enough and willing to put some details on paper, it's going to help this process if we can start documenting specific cases that can be put in formal complaints. Obioma, go ahead.
Mrs. Obioma for the record. So I just wanted to see if any of the commissioners are willing to support the community if they were to, in fact, want to make that formal grievance. They would need support. English is not the first language, and so would anyone be opening to getting their feedback and then translating it into English for them? Laura? This is Laura for the record. I don't know if we're going to answer this on the meeting now, if anyone's available to help, but I volunteer for that. I can help. I would just need to figure out which hat I would be wearing in order to do that, but I see the value in it, and I see that and I would love to advocate for that community need. And this is Obioma for the record. I personally feel that if the commission becomes more open to the community and engaging them in that way, then you will see an increase of town hall engagement, an increase of willingness to step up, because I think right now it's very lonely to transition in that way, to give my name, to fill out a complaint, and to feel confident in doing that and submitting it in English without knowing whether or not they would have the support of others. Lance?
Hello, this is Lance Leday for the record. I just wanted to say that I also volunteer to assist in any way I can. If Laura needs any help, I'm here.
Awesome. Thank you, Lance. Okay, so at this time, I need to have someone make a motion in order to move forward with the list that I provided from my recommendations. We do need to talk about our chair report. So, and that's lengthy. So we want to go ahead and proceed with this item. So can I get a motion for this particular agenda item? The ask from the executive director.
Go ahead, Laura.
And this is Laura Fussell for the record. I so move that motion that we accept the recommendations from the executive director.
There's a second from Eli. All in favor of the motion, please signal by raising your hand. Thank you. It passes unanimously. Thanks, everybody. Any further comments on this? I understand there may be some interest in public comment at the end, and so we certainly will have an opportunity for that. With that, then let's move on to item 9 of the agenda. This is review, discuss, and approve recommendations from the director and chair's report. That document is in the meeting materials. We're going to progress as quickly as we can through this, but there's some spots we want to linger on. The first part of that document is for me. This is just a general budget update. Our budget of the commission for fiscal year 24 started at 26,528. Our total expenditures to date, through March, through March was $19,808. And there's an additional $127.92 of pending transactions. So balance as of.
Eric, this is Obioma.
Yeah.
I think there's an error. It should be it should be March 31st. I'm sorry. I'm making a note of that for the balance.
Gotcha. Okay, so balance as of end of March, $6,591.93 in the commission budget. Acknowledging the chair and the vice chair elections, which we just did. And then the communication access services report. So that report is in the meeting materials. And hopefully everybody had a chance to review that. To streamline this, we've not asked the CAS program to actually read their report, but it is there in the meeting materials. And at this time, I would invite Jen Montoya to answer any questions. If there's any questions from members of the, hi Jen, welcome. Any questions from members of the commission on the Communication Access Services Program report? And this is it. Go ahead, Jen.
Eric, this is Jen. I would like to make a comment.
Yeah.
And so I would just like to say that at the previous meeting, we talked about the Nevada Care connection and the data. Someone had caught some errors in regards to that data. And so I wanted to clarify that, because after that discussion, I did in fact reach out to NVCC, and we identified what the issue was in regards to collecting data and why there was that error. How they collect their data and run their reports is on a monthly basis instead of a total by quarter. So January to March, for example, they don't run it in a quarter, they run it as a month. And so when you run a report by the month, some of the clients are still continuing to receive services into the next month. So they transition to the next month and it becomes a duplicate because they're not running the report as a quarter. So if we run it as a quarter, we won't receive that duplication in numbers and have that error again. So that's where it came from. So we documented that in the current report so that information would be accessible. And then we made the changes so that the information would be accurate from the previous report. So you'll see the second and third quarter documented, and that data is present for you to see.
This is Eric. Thanks very much, Jen, for following up on that item and that clarification. Let me also let the record reflect that Jeff and Kim are here from our team of interpreters in the interpreter registry. Thank you for being here. Any last questions, comments from anybody on the commission? Obioma?
This is Obioma for the record. No, nothing from me specifically.
Gotcha.
I just wanted to make sure that we recognize Jen for making those modifications and giving that information to the team. I know that you had to chase down a lot of data in order for us to get that information, but we do appreciate that.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, CAS team. We will move on to the next items in the report. The next item is the membership updates, membership of the commission, that is. As you know, there are still a handful of open seats on the commission. There are no further updates since our last meeting on new appointments to the commission. If you're interested in serving on the commission, please reach out to Obioma for information on how to apply if you need information on that. You don't apply to us, you do apply through the governor's office, but we can provide you with details about how to do that. The open positions include a representative from the Nevada Association for the Deaf. There's applicants on file for that, but that has not been approved. I encourage you to encourage the governor to fill that seat. As I said at all of our meetings, please write to the governor and or write to NVAD or do something. We need that seat filled. Current vacancy for the executive director of the Telecommunications Association. That's a non-voting seat. An open seat for a member who represents educators in the state. We have confirmed there are applicants on file for that seat. And then one member who is registered to engage in the practice of sign language interpreting. And we have confirmed there are applications on file for that seat as well. Moving on, outreach efforts, events, and announcements. This item is for Obioma. Do you want to go ahead, Obioma?
Yes, this is Obioma for the record. So I'm trying to make this as brief as possible, but I encourage you to please take the time to read through this report so that you can get more information and dive deep into all the activities that are involved with the commission and your director. So we do have a plan for our 2024 engagement conference. We will have 3 engagements with the community. Sorry, that was the interpreter. A 3-day engagement conference. Friday, December 13th, which is a half day. December 14th, which is a full day. And December 15th, which is dedicated to the community. They will be the ones hosting that day. So that will be networking. So anybody that has the ability to go will be able to engage and network. We also have some other things that we need to consider with our activities moving forward. We just had a town hall, and that was the April tour that we did of the state. We did Ely, we did Reno, and we did Las Vegas. And I did a video for each town hall in order to engage the community. I encourage you to watch those videos and see how I, as the executive director, addressed our engagement moving forward. So the feedback is that some really enjoyed being able to see that. They liked seeing the town hall. They liked to see the community engage. They liked to see the towns that we went to and be able to get that information. So it was good for the commission and good for the community to see that the commission is doing the work and having different activities. So for this particular tour, we had 11 staff and commissioners for Elite, and nobody showed up from the community. We had no community members at this particular engagement. So we did cold stops the next day in order to reach out to people directly. And I was able to make those stops myself. Second town hall was in Reno. We had 3 commissioners and 32 community members, which is huge. That's a big number. That's an improvement from the last. And for Las Vegas, we had 7 commission members and state staff and 94 members of the community that showed up. So a good turnout for that. And again, we will do this in October. We will do our town halls in Elko, Reno, and Las Vegas. So we're still working on the locations. Reason being is some are responding to some have yet to respond to the requests that we've made. So now, just wanted to remind everyone about the conference that's coming up. Please review that part of the report. It's important. important that you are aware of the larger deaf and hard of hearing community. All right, so this part is definitely important. So we're gonna take a moment and turn this over to Eric.
Sorry, I just want to make sure we're at community contacts. Is that correct?
Yes, that's right.
Let's see. I'm just looking through the list. So we've addressed. So actually, the top of this section, Obioma lists you. I wondered if you wanted to
Oh, Eric, you're right.
mention
I'm
the May
sorry.
4th.
Back to me. Back to me.
Yeah.
All right. So my fault. Okay. I'm sorry. This is Obioma for the record. So we talked about the annual report. We talked about the recommendations for grievances from the community in regards to a civil class action lawsuit. So we went through all that. So on May 4th, we had a community event that we were a part of. We joined it up with Las Vegas Deaf Seniors. They were the ones who hosted this particular event. It was a community engagement cookout. They made a special announcement about wanting to open a deaf center called Sammy's Den, SAMMYS, Sammy's Den, DEN. Yes. Deaf Empowering Now. DEN. So that's related to a specific community member that has been working for many years. She's a daughter of one of our legacy members of our deaf and hard of hearing community, and they set up the sports center, or set up a sports team, the bowling team for the deaf in Nevada. And then it became a nationwide team. And his daughter is the one that's now helping to set up a deaf center here in Nevada. And just hold on. And we're going to hold on one second. We're going to switch interpreters.
So there's official nonprofit LLC that they're working on behind the scenes, and we hopefully will have, I think it was 4 to 6 weeks from Saturday, the previous Saturday, that they will be opening. So we will see. We are definitely looking forward and supporting any of the efforts. And we'll have a networking engagement meeting next week, the 14th, hosted by the executive director here, myself personally, to make sure that we get all of the partners involved so that they gain understanding of how they can support this Sammy's Den moving forward. Not only this organization, but just in general, getting everybody on board to collaborate and work together to see action for deaf centers, for advocacy moving forward for the state of Nevada. That is it. So I will hand it over to you, Eric.
Thank you, Obioma. This is Eric Wilcox for the record. Moving down the list, the April Town Hall tour comes up again here, and Obioma asked that I sort of briefly talk about the outcomes and the takeaways from that. Some of these we've already addressed. For example, the ADA compliance we just had a long discussion about. We continue to receive requests for advocating for a school for the deaf. That even came up again last week when we testified to the legislature. So some legislators are thinking about this as well. So maybe there's an opportunity to have that conversation with legislators. Deaf Center, of course, is something that continually comes up. We've just heard about community efforts to try to organize around that, but also I think there's a lot of work for us to do with the Aging and Disability Services Division around the funding for particularly the access to services in the Deaf Center, which is written into the law, which says that ADSD must establish a Deaf Center. And I want to draw your attention in the meeting materials. There is a documentation of some correspondence between me and the leadership of the CAS program and ADSD. Jeff Duncan being the one that responded to me in that email exchange. That was an outgrowth of discussion from the town hall meeting we did in Las Vegas last fall, where I was asked if I could find out where the expenditures of the telecommunications surcharge money is going to that's funding the CAS program. There was specific interest in understanding how much of that money is going, for example, to Care Connection and other subgrantees, so that the community could evaluate where that money is going and whether they feel like they're getting the services out of that money that they're supposed to be getting. So you can see, I won't go through it in detail, but you can see the questions there. Some of those questions that I asked were about funding. Some of those questions were about how the deaf centers are funded, what the matching requirements are. And basically, I think there's a need for follow-up on that. And so they weren't available to actually have that follow-up during this public meeting, but between now and the next public meeting, I hope to have a follow-up discussion with them on some of these issues, and maybe talk about some of the practical constraints that hindered the operation of the Deaf Centers of Nevada, so that we can help avoid those in the future. The next time, and this is going to come up next year, my understanding is there's going to be a NOFO, a Notice of Funding Opportunities for grants to do the access to services programs again. Hopefully there will be a deaf center that will propose to do at least some subset of those services, and particularly the access to services for the adult population, which is where the biggest need is not being met right now. And we want to make sure that those of us on the commission provide as much input as we can to ADSD on the structure of that NOFO, that we get to the bottom of why the Deaf Centers of Nevada was forced to close its doors, and how we can avoid that happening again in the future. So that's what that communication was about. And feel free, if you read through that exchange and you have more questions or comments for me, anybody in the community, you'll see my email address is right there. Or you can write to the commission address and Obioma will pass that along to me. And we will report back to the commission on any discussions along those lines that happen offline between now and the next meeting. I also want to draw your attention to legislative advocacy. This was mentioned earlier in the meeting, and I wanted to revisit it again. Last week on April 30th, a presentation was made by myself, Obioma, and Shelley Freed from the Las Vegas Deaf Seniors, broadly about the needs of the community and the challenges faced by the community. This was for the standing interim committee on services for the disabled adults and veterans. That's the purview of this particular committee. So we sort of focused a little bit on the needs of the adult community, although conversations about education, even early childhood education, did come up in that discussion as well. It was there were some. I encourage you, if you have a couple of hours this weekend, to go back and view the recording of that. And I think the link is hopefully in the meeting materials, or if not, we can get it to you. First of all, the recording was not accessible, and I apologize for that. The meeting was more accessible than past meetings, I think, if you were actually sitting in the meeting, but the recording did not capture all of the accessibility that was put in place for the meeting. So that's something we're going to take up with them. In particular, the presentation that we made went reasonably smoothly. The discussion afterwards with the legislators got a little bit sidetracked because the chair of the committee really wanted to talk about election accessibility, which was not part of our presentation, although that is an important issue. But then sort of missed what the key accessibility issue is for the deaf and hard of hearing, which is for those whose primary language is ASL. There's no accommodations in the elections process, and we tried to emphasize that point, but that wasn't really the point that the senator wanted to make. She seemed to want to make a point about mail-in ballots and how those help with accessibility. So the discussion got a little bit sidetracked by that issue. And then I encourage you, if you do watch that video, to skip ahead one or two agenda items after our presentation. Catherine Nielsen presented on behalf of the Council on Developmental Disabilities, broadly on the topic of adults with disabilities in the state, although she did specifically mention some aspects related to accessibility for deaf and hard of hearing in her remarks. And that's where she met with some hostile questions from some members of that committee. And even a suggestion from a state senator that they don't have capacity to handle accessibility in their legislative meetings, and that maybe the federal funding that the DD Council gets should be used for that purpose. And we tried to or Catherine, I should say, tried to clarify for them that they have a state-funded team of interpreters specifically for the purpose of providing accessibility, but they didn't seem to catch that point. And so the discussion really kind of went off the rails there quite a bit. I want to acknowledge Catherine's willingness to put herself out there, and I thought her reaction and responses to that were very clear, and she did try to clarify the key points. And I want to note that also in the meeting materials, there was a comment that was submitted from a member of the community to those members of the commission, those members of the legislative committee that we were copied on. I encourage you to read that. That talks a little bit about some of the ways in which this individual felt that the way the legislators on the committee handled this wasn't helpful to the community. And I want to note that I intend to follow up with a letter to the members of the committee specifically on these issues of accessibility and some of their misunderstandings that came out during the question and answer period, and clarify for them that they have a team of interpreters. And I'll reiterate the point that I've made in the past, that I think the CAS interpreting team should be continually working on outreach to the legislature on accessibility of these meetings. I think that the way the law is written, that seems to me to be within their purview. So I will emphasize that point again and encourage them to reach out to the CAS team on making these meetings more accessible, and also making the recordings that come out afterwards fully accessible. Obioma, did you want to?
Yes, this is Obioma for the record. Just a final comment here when we talk about the civil proposal future engagement with legislators. There is a discussion in the community about showing up to their next meeting, which is August 20th of 2024, and showing up as civil as possible and kind of like propose, maybe with like t-shirts, and kind of just being there present to watch their presentations and make sure that they know that we are not divided any longer, and that there is camaraderie here. And so just wanted the commission to know that that is what's going on in the community for that legislative meeting, August 20th, 2024. People do anticipate to show up, both North and South. Again, as civil advocates for accessibility, just as raising awareness and being there.
This is Eric. For the record, thank you, Obioma, for clarifying that point. August 20, 2024, mark that on your calendar. And then there's a note here, if you want to follow up with questions about details about any of these collaborations or engagements, the Deaf Commission's web email address is listed there. So feel free to write to that email address, and we get those and we respond to those.
This is Obioma. It's my part now.
Okay, go ahead, Obioma, please.
Yes, this is Obioma for the record. I know we are running out of time here. So I'm going to make this as brief as possible as I go through this next part. And then we open up the floor to the community. Keep in mind, though, we do have a subcommittee report. I know y'all are aware with this, but the ask will be a proposal for everybody to address that through electronically. I'm going to say through an electronic vote. I don't know if that conflicts with the bylaws. I don't think it does from what I've seen, but the proposal for the elections, and then I believe we can move forward with that. So the first part here is of the engagement. The important one that you need to know is about the Deaf Camp that is happening this year. It's called Beyond the Deaf Home. The camp is happening June 10th through the 15th. We currently had the job announcement posted. So please, if you know of anybody who is interested, please invite them to apply. And this is going to be through NVBDA. The other things that we need to know, it's imperative that I, as the executive director, partners with the DD Council for grants that, just clarifying, grants that are going to support the deaf school notion, potentially. So if anyone is already currently working on that, continue to do so, please. The more funds that we receive, the better. And that is it. Just please keep in mind, and for the next meetings that are upcoming, when you take a look at that, these are going to be the reports as well. Now I'm going to be asking for a motion to vote on all of the subcommittee reports that are done through email through me, if that's okay, and to have them submitted directly to me, so that y'all will have access to the reports. Please make a decision through each of these reports. Take a look at it and say support, don't support, what have you. And then I'll be able to share the results to the community afterwards. If I could have a motion for that, please. Laura Fussell here for the record. So I definitely, I motion that we do this through email. I move.
Second to that?
All right, Eric seconds. Okay. All in favor?
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, so that passes. All right, go ahead, Eric, with the public comment, please.
Okay, great. Thank you. So we will skip item 10 and do that offline via email for that vote that we just had. That moves us to item 11 on the agenda, which is public comment. And Lorraine, I think, is going to read her instructions again. Go ahead, Lorraine.
This is Lorraine Belt-Dolan for the record. No action may be taken upon a matter raised under the public comment period unless the matter itself has been specifically included on an agenda as an action item. To provide public comment telephonically, dial 646-931-3860. When prompted to provide the meeting ID, enter 824-3032-7521. Passcode is 302608. Comments will be limited to 5 minutes per person. People making comments will be asked to begin by stating their name for the record and to spell their last name and provide the secretary with written comments. Public comment period is now open. And if you're attending via Zoom, you can use the raise hand feature or turn on your camera and wave at us and let us know that you're ready for public comment. And I believe we have somebody who has joined us via phone that would like to comment, Eric.
Yes, this is Eric for the record. I also have Shelley Freed on the list, but let me start with the phone. Could the phone caller like to make a comment?
Yeah, hi, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, please.
Hi, this is Betty Hammond for the record. I'm an auxiliary member of the deaf community, and I'm on 2 subcommittees with your commission. For full disclosure, I ran the programs for the deaf and the deaf centers, and while they needed improvement, my heart has literally been broken by the damage that has been done by Aging and Disability Service Division. And I'm not the only employee that feels that way. I've made contact with a lawyer to get good names in Nevada of disability lawyers. I think it's time for class action, and I'm going to look into that and pursue that. While I appreciate very much what the language specialist from the state said, that only includes programs with the state. The deaf centers used to be a place where deaf people of any walk of life could go for county, city, personal, all kinds of information that provided them access in ASL. And the state added auxiliary information to help that out, videos and things like that. We don't have that now. And as you said, Eric, it is in the law. I'm sorry, I'm looking at my notes. So the state as a whole is not following the law. It's out there. They've chosen not to follow it. Our stopgap remedy was the deaf centers. My experience there and observation was that I was not heard as an expert and a member of the community. I felt pushed out and I left thinking it was me, and they pushed out another expert. And the person they put in our place is unaware of a lot of aspects of the job, and she's outnumbered, poor thing. And I don't think this is right. So I do think a class action is needed because the state of Nevada as a whole has screwed deaf people from cradle to grave. Just totally screwed them over, ignored the laws. And I've been part of the community. I've seen it get better, although not perfect. And now it's horrible. I'm out there as an interpreter. I see people with problems that the center could help. Here's the thing, they don't have the language ability that they've been deprived of by the state to contact the state to ask for things in sign language. It's ridiculous. This needs to stop. And that's my opinion. And I thank you for listening. And I'm happy to meet up with anybody. A lot of you know my number. I'm getting this going. I'm done. Thanks.
This is Eric. Thank you,
I'm
Betty.
done with my... You're welcome.
I will go to Shelley Freed. Go ahead, Shelley.
Just give me a moment to pin
Sure.
Shelley.
Yep.
Okay, got her. Hello, this is Shelley Freed for the record. I would like to make a public comment in regards to the CAS program, NRS 417A. Hold on, let the interpreter get the numbers again, just to make sure. NRS 427A.797. And this is in regards to issues related to interpreting. And it clearly states here, interpreters are made available when possible for executive, judicial, and legislative department and state government departments that provide services to provide access to the deaf and hard of hearing in the state of Nevada. And that division will provide the money needed that's available for one or more interpreters for undelivered services for the state purposes of the state. That's what the paragraph says. I am going to be very straightforward. I have been in legislative meetings. I've gone to Deaf Day at the legislature, and we had to do everything in our power to fight to get the CAS interpreters to work. And that is not acceptable. I should not have to fight for the state interpreters to come interpret at Deaf Day at the legislature. Why are they giving contracts to other ASLCOM, to other agencies to provide interpreters for purposes of this meeting, for legislative meetings, for judicial meetings, for anything related to what this paragraph is saying? I don't have the benefit of having these interpreters. What are they doing? This paragraph says that the regulations are this and they will be provided. And I understand that the interpreters have set up these services of mentoring. Okay, but that's not under the law. It's not under the regulation. Why did you set that service up? If there's an interpreter mentoring program, let the Department of Education set it up. And I did ask, to be clear, I did ask Jen, I want to know how many minutes are the CAS interpreters provided that we can get back. So, and we don't have that information. We don't have any data. We don't know how many hours were involved. We don't have it. Okay. So I understand the role of an interpreter. I understand interpreters have to be registered, and I understand the relay, but the CAS interpreters, that program has 4 interpreters, and they get a huge chunk of money that should be providing services for the deaf community. That is a huge irritation to me. It is so frustrating, and I feel sometimes I request for a specific interpreter for a purpose of having the services as I'm doing work in the community that's directly related to the state of Nevada, and I'm not able to get an interpreter. So I'm asking the commission, please investigate this. Look into this paragraph. Look into what is the interpretation of this paragraph, get the information, and find out where this money and funding is going for said interpreters that are supposed to provide this service, and how many minutes are they actually having their hands up to work and accomplishing the service? How many workshops are being given? How many services are being, because that money is being put into the interpreters in the community. That's not what the funding was for CAS. How did they set that up? How did they come to that? I want to know answers to all these questions. Thank you very much.
This is Derek. Thank you, Shelley. Any other public comment?
Yes.
Go ahead.
This-
On the phone, state your
This
name.
is Betty Hammond.
Oh, go ahead,
This is
Betty.
Betty Hammond again, for the record. Instead of saying left, I'm going to say before I was pushed out of that position, one of the fights I had with my boss was over this. The interpreter pool was originally designed to make up for the lack of interpreting within state agencies like vocational rehab, DMV. If they couldn't find an interpreter, they were going to be charged the same amount. So we're not undercutting agencies. The interpreter would come from the pool. There were job descriptions made. As Shelley asked about mentoring, that was only supposed to be in extreme downtimes. I had hired someone to set up a system so that the program could generate income and we could track that and hire a certified deaf interpreter. All of that was squashed. Very distressing to me. And now what I hear from other people is those interpreters decide they don't want to do this because it's a conflict of interest, and they don't want to do that. And they are, Shelley is correct, doing the education department's job, being overpaid to do it. I was in the legislature fighting for those positions, and they weren't to make lesser interpreters better and to be giving workshops all the time. It was to provide access, and I'm going to say it out loud. The person running the programs has no idea, doesn't want to have an idea, and doesn't give a crap. And it needs to end. And I'm done. Thank you.
This is Derek. Thank you, Betty. Any other public comment? Okay, seeing none, then Thank you all for being here. Thank you all for providing your comments and your input. And the meeting is adjourned. Thank you.